We have a special IU report with Grant Shouse coming up. But before we get to that, I want to tell you about the Central Indiana Sports Report's daily report. Every day at 1 o'clock, our Sports Center style podcast goes over all of the previous days, professional college and high school sports in Central Indiana. Again, every weekday at 1 all year long. You are listening to the Central Indiana Sports Report podcast number 237.2, a special IU report with Grant Shouse. Grant is joined today by Tipton Tribune and Elwood Call Leader sports editor Michelle Garmon and Will Retherford to talk about IU basketball's latest signings, plus more portal rumors. And Michelle talks a little bit about the latest in the IU women's roster moves.
You're listening to the Central Indiana Sports Report with your host, Greg Mengelt.
Here we are back at stage 22 for a special IU report with Grant Shouse here today to talk about the formation of the men's basketball roster under head coach Darren DeVries. A couple more additions, including a pretty big one yesterday. Grant, take it away.
Lamar Wilkerson joining the squad now is probably the best, at the time of him being in the portal, the best three-point shooter in the portal at about 45% from three. And then just about an hour or two before we started recording this, they picked up a transfer from North Florida, Jasai Miles, who averaged 14 a game, about 6 or 7 rebounds for them as well. It could also shoot the rock at over 40% from three. So getting these additions to shoot the basketball well, and, I don't know how well you guys watch IU. I'm assuming pretty closely during the year. We've seen in the last couple of years that they've not had great three-point shooting. It's actually been really bad. And especially when you're relying on kind of the NBA style of how they played their offense under the previous administration, you got to get guys that are going to be able to shoot threes at a high percentage, and they're getting that with, of course, Tucker DeVries and now Lamar Wilkerson, who I think is probably their biggest addition that they've got.
I'm going to say that it's only a positive if when you practice and you work shooting. It's not that they had bad 3-point that they recruited or had brought in bad 3-point shooters. It's that, especially with Woodson and even with Miller, they didn't develop. And if you watch a lot of their shooting drills, I'm not so sure they really did shooting drills at game speed and real hard, because you can tell
I agree.
I mean, Trey Galloway improved from his sophomore to his junior year, but I'm going to guess that had more to do with his dad being a basketball coach.
And I think that also just goes into his individual
Yes,
work.
but that's what I mean. I think a lot of it's because his dad was a coach and said, hey, if you want this, you know how you get to go and make it better. So, I mean, just high numbers doesn't always transcend, but because I watched Drake play when DeVries was coaching and watched them be able to hit threes and everything, he knows what he wanted. He's getting guys that can shoot volume threes because he's going to work, and that's going to be a prominent part of their offense. Kind of like, Crean. They worked. I know firsthand. I talked to Derek when he was down there. You go down there early, which I did a few times before they would play, and they're warming up before they're in their uniforms, and they never did anything not game speed, even in warm-ups. And I think they did the last 4 to 8 years. So, yes, getting the threes is great. I'm not going to say that they brought in bad three-point shooters per se before. They just didn't continue to develop them or run an offense that set them for them. And I think a perfect example is kind of Luke Goody and kind of the inconsistency he had this year. So that's why I look with the reason I love it, the fact that he's going out and he's getting guys that are going to fit what he wants to do.
And then it'd be like guys you'd have
go across the women's locker room
who would
and
come
watch
out
the women's
in the first few minutes and bang 3 or 4 of them.
They
never got the ball again. Or he never was able to shoot those shots
and that's because
again.
that's what they worked on. They practiced.
And
their
that's on coaching, and that's on, I think, your your roster
yes,
you have,
even
the
when they had
personnel you
homes, it
have.
came back
Because
out for those kids to shoot three.
let's face it, the previous coach
it's a system, and
was just not a
Woodson
very
and
good coach
Archie
at
Miller and Woodson,
managing
they never had
all
systems
of
or an
that
identity.
at the
He
college
wasn't. Or teams
level.
with identity.
So that's all I got to
That's
say.
and, you know, and
with
that's
DeVries,
why
that's why
because the
I
3-point shooters. When we
that's
talk
why
about that,
as
is
a
all you
hire-
have to do is I like it. Now I sit there and I say, yeah, it's great. And you look and you also think, gosh, what Quinn Buckner here, one of the legends of IU legends, and his obstinance to keep a buddy in a job, because you think if a year ago, because I really believe Dolson and Witten wanted to pull the trigger on Woodson a year ago, but they kept him. And you look at guys like Pat Kelsey and May, Dusty May, two guys that possibly could have hired. I will say this, I think out of the group that they were looking at this year, I know he thinks Chris Beard. I like DeVries. I thought DeVries was the great hire for that because of his ties to the Midwest. He's going to be well respected. I think he's a supporter of other athletic programs, and I think to be successful, you have to have that. I mean, Woodson's door was not open to Terry Morin. Matt Painters is open to Katie Gerald's all the time.
Yeah.
Tom Crean and Terry Moore, and they had open doors. They consulted with each other a lot.
Yeah, and just real quick, I did kind of agree with Greg earlier when we would talk about it, when it seemed like every time we talked, it was about the new coach, who the new coach was going to be. And for a long time, and he'll tell you that we both agreed, we thought Chris Beard was the answer. But in retrospect, I think looking back, I think I don't know how we missed DeVries. I know they haven't taken the floor yet, but what they've started to do and what you started exactly. So it's hard to really, I guess, make that a firm answer
unless you watched, and I did watch
exactly. That's what I'm saying.
The past, so I've seen, so I know he's a coach that has an identity and he has a system, and I didn't think, because I'd watched Dayton play when Archie coached, and
he should have never left Dayton.
Well, he shouldn't have, but I'm not so sure he would have lasted a whole lot longer there either. No. Well, you can say what you want, but look what Rhode Island, they're ready to. They want what IU want. They want to get Archie Miller out of there. Yeah. I think they thought that Archie was going to be as good as his brother Sean, and he is not. He's 2-3 levels below his brother when it comes to coaching.
Go easy, Will.
You know what? I actually, before Michelle started saying things like what she just said, I was actually going to agree pretty much with everything. Here's what I'll say. It's apples to oranges comparing to how coaches coach now versus how they coached 8 years ago, just with the NIL and stuff like that. Uh-huh. Whether you want to admit it or not, you may have bad ill will towards what he did at IU, but Archie Miller was really good at Dayton. Archie Miller accomplished an awful lot at Dayton. I mean, took him to an Elite Eight.
In a very weak basketball conference. The Atlantic 10 is not good.
Butler went. So does that discredit what Butler did with the 2 years they went to the national championship back to back because they were in the A10 when they did it? I mean,
no, they're in the Horizon League.
No, they were in the A10.
They were in the A10. Okay.
I mean, I just
and they were in the A10, and then of course their success postseason got them up from the Horizon to the A10, and then it took them up to the Big East. Okay. But I watched his teams. They were physical, but offensively, they did not have an identity, and they never did it. That's why I did not. They weren't great 3-point shooting teams. They were straight. I always thought, here's my thing: if you're going to get rid of a coach, you've got to get better. You can't go lateral, and you can't go below unless it's an ethics thing. They took a whole step below Archie Miller over Tom Crean. Tom Crean would coach circles around Archie Miller 365 days out of the year.
I thought I said that I think DeVries was he was a C+ hire. I think he's done a B+ job so far. I think that he's brought in guys that probably fit his identity as far as packing it in a little bit on defense, not really playing as much in transition, being a good 3-point shooting team, and really having a strong defensive identity. I agree with what you said as far as they did take a step down. Tom Crean should have never gotten fired. But it goes to the same thing that it always goes to, is that IU fans get impatient and they get restless and they don't like that to face the truth that they're not the same.
That was
IU
more
they were
Fred
in the-
Glass, Tom Crean butting heads. It was not as
What-
much for the
whatever
fans
it
as what
was,
you
it
think.
had
I mean,
no
that's what that
business.
was.
It had no business happening. And Tom Crean went down to Georgia after he got fired at IU and took him to the tournament a couple times for a program historically that really had not
I know,
ever
and,
been
and,
there.
and he got fired at Georgia. And I always thought I felt sorry. Tom just wanted to coach, but Georgia was the worst situation for him. That's why I felt sorry for him. Grant, I want to ask you: have you heard what do you know about bringing in some big guys? Because I mean, we're getting a lot of wings, and but I mean, some other. I mean, nice. Don't get me wrong, nice size guys, and I know one big
lot of
ones, but
time.
right. But
I
I mean,
think-
what have you heard about who they may be pursuing that way?
I think some of these guys that you got to get are kind of like guys like Lamar Wilkerson. I think a lot of people, he showed up on radars because obviously the 45% three-point shooting pops out at you. But these are guys that you don't really know who they are. Like they're not – it's not like last year when they were going and getting Umar Balo, who was a guy who's already well-known. You're getting these mid-major guys that have flown under the radar that are coming in that you can kind of develop. They already have a big guy with Reed Bailey, and of course you need more of that. I mean,
Right. That's what I mean. I knew they had
don't
Reed,
wanna
and I
be-
like Reed. I like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, they still need what they're
They
still
need
gonna
more muscle.
they're still gonna have a guy that can contend with Trey Kaufman-Renn and the
You
Clough
want-
kid from Purdue.
I think you want good guards, but you don't want too many guards. You know what I mean? Like you don't.
I don't know. I
You
think he
don't
likes
need too many.
But he likes. I'll tell you this. I don't. You can, but I think he likes kind of like the 4 out, 1 in, which means your big doesn't have to be a super scorer. He's just got to be. He's got to be able to score. In certain things, he's got to be able to be good on the offensive glass. But if you can put 4 good shooters out there, and do that, and so, as long as they're. I get guards, yes, if they're 6'3" or under, but if you're getting some of those guards that are 6'6" and 6'7", I think you're fine.
like Tucker.
But yeah, I do still think you need a physical presence in the post defensively, not necessarily for offensive purposes as much for defensive purposes.
I agree with what you're saying as far as the 4 out, 1 in. I think it can play in the Big Ten. I don't know on a national scale that it plays, to be honest with you. I think when you watch these tournaments, this tournament we watched this past year.
Well, I thought Duke was pretty much 4 out and 1 in.
I mean, yeah, but you had Flag that could go down and bang down low too. I mean, he was. It wasn't like he was afraid to go down there. But Duke may be the exception to this. But Auburn, Florida, and Houston, they're all too big. They're cycling in bigs. I mean, you're talking about the Big Ten country hates to say it, but the SEC's flipped a corner. I mean, this is a conference you need to worry about winning national championships every year now. They're not just going to suddenly start being terrible after the year that they had this past year. I think that while IU, you have to build to win your conference, and I agree with what you're doing as far as I do agree with Grant. There are too many cooks in the kitchen, especially with guards. But I think that if they want to truly build this national success back to where it was, they have to play towards the national and not just play to be better.
You can say
be
that,
better in the state of
but
Indiana.
Two
Be better
bigs,
in the
still
Big
two
Ten.
bigs on the floor. Michigan is the only team I saw that really played 2 true posts on the floor at the same time. But Wolf can go out and hit threes. That's a huge difference. You could do double bigs better a year ago than what they could this year because Khalil Ware could step outside and knock down shots.
Every once in a while.
Yes, I mean, he could. I mean, and here's the problem. I want somebody big in there to bang. I think you still can if you do it right. If you get a 6'7" kid that can guard, all right. It all depends on what you're matching up against because it's Granted, it's tough. I mean, Houston had 25-year-old men out there playing.
Yeah.
And they're going to be there next year.
My thing is when they, going back to what we were talking about earlier, where Indiana and wanting to get rid of the old coach, and I think you're right in that the president, Pamela Whitten and Scott Dolson wanted to get rid of him last year. That's why there was the talk of last year, like they had to announce he was coming back. But I think the other biggest wake-up call, they were like, well, we'll let him come back, but we'll give him one more year. And then they really were like, when the football program turned it around, when the football program turned it around and did what they did, they go, we have to do this in basketball. We cannot let this slide. Michelle, you want to talk a little bit about the women program that, now has the roster completely, like, the bottom kind of fell out a little bit where it almost had nobody left, and now starting to pick up stuff in the portal.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I will say this, that Terry said after they lost to South Carolina, they need to get a little bit bigger and a little bit more athletic. My guess is this, because every player has played for Terry, and even the ones that have left, they've not said anything bad about the coaches or the program. And in fact, what I found out was they got in that Stotine, the transfer from Arizona that's originally from the Netherlands. And she said, she chose IU because she felt comfortable there. But what really made her feel comfortable and like everything was above board was she talked to every player that left too, that was graduating or entered the portal. I mean, IU, Terry, and her staff made that available to her, as well as to the returning players, which I think that says kudos about kind of what, when you're talking about building. And so she chose to sign, and then they've got, then they got the big from UCLA, and who I believe played for Coach Morin when she coached the USA women, and Indiana was among her finalists, and she went to UCLA. She entered the portal. My guess is because Betts' little sister's coming next year, so I think she really enjoyed playing for Terry, and so that's a big, because that's 6'3", that's a nice big, and then
that kind of stuff helps you get players.
Yes, it does.
When you need them.
Yes, and then they got another one from Virginia, and she's originally from Sweden. I mean, IU likes the international, so they have it in. And Lily Meister has signed now with Kansas. And Jules Amendola has signed with Grand Canyon. I hate it. I like.
She gonna play online?
And then, for Jules, that gets her a little closer to home. She's from Texas. I don't know. I know Lexus Bargesser actually had a visit to Purdue this last weekend. I think now IU will have to go to Maryland this year. But one of the things I saw, because, Yarden ended up at Maryland, and the Maryland fan said, because he likes IU's program, respects IU's women's program too, but he said, hey, folks, he goes, get too hard. He goes, Maryland has the biggest Jewish student enrollment and Jewish, centers there on campus, and, like anybody in the Big Ten and, along the East. So, that's good for her to go there. I hate it. But I said, if Lexus ends up at Purdue, I hope she realizes that she probably will not, even though for her contributions at IU, that would be the one thing you would not get. You would probably get booed at if you come when Purdue comes to Assembly Hall. If you go to Purdue,
she will not be welcomed home.
Not like that. Now IU will have to go to Maryland this year because they hosted them, this past season. But I like the IU. Is Indiana's roster is starting to take some shape. For them, I think the key is I'm really excited, and I'm hoping she stays healthy, and that is Lene Beaumont, because she's like a Sydney Perry. She's got an outstanding basketball IQ. And I said last year I was watching, because highlights, they put highlights on, and she was actually Chloe Moore McNeil's actually guarding her, and she broke Chloe's ankles and went to the rim, scored. And then so what you've got is, what was great is you look at Chloe's reaction and just self-disgust, because, big time difference. So if healthy, she can be a difference maker for the Hoosiers. But hey, Will, you should be proud of your Ball State Cardinals women's basketball team. They had quite a ride, and they're doing pretty good. Oh, I forgot, IU also got Chloe Spring. Came back to Indiana, so they have another Miss Basketball.
That's huge, and just from her being from Bedford, 15 minutes down the road, that's a big pickup. That's maybe their biggest pickup in the portal, because I think they can develop her into a good point guard.
Yeah, I think I don't know that how much they want her. I don't think it's necessarily point guard. I think they want her as a big, maybe a two guard a little bit, or maybe to see if she can kind of fill some of the role that kind of like Sid did. If they can develop her into that, and Makalewski, because the Stotine, one of the reasons she left, not Arizona, sorry, she left Arkansas was because she's a one. She's a point guard, and they tried to play her at two. And she goes, my shooting percentages were off. I'm spending so much time trying to learn this new position. And so she said, I want to get back and I'm going to work on those, on the shot. But I think it gives them, and Terry likes to have 2 point guards on the floor because she's done it before. I mean, she'll play two at the same time because Krzyzewski kind of played the point. Chloe was a little bit of a point, so it should work out. And with Shay, because she great shooter, so.
Michelle, Grant, Will, thank you so much for your time tonight talking some NBA and some college basketball here. Also, Will's 5 questions that need answers. If you're interested in what he has to say, there's more. So go find all of those podcasts, and we've had a lot of fun tonight. It's bedtime. Good night, everybody. And about 5 minutes after we got done recording, Inside the Hall reported that Indiana has gotten a commitment from Troy transfer Tayton Connerway. So big news keeps coming for the IU basketball program. We will talk to Grant about that coming up in the next couple of days. Thanks again to Grant, Michelle, and Will for joining the Central Indiana Sports Report. And thank you for listening. If you would like to see us continue to grow and thrive, please consider sharing these segments with your friends and family. We humbly thank you in advance. The Central Indiana Sports Report is a product of ITG Media, and I love Susie.